get started here. My name is Joe Devlin. I'm with the Office of Cannabis Policy and Enforcement. We don't have really a tight agenda in terms of things that we're covering. I'm hoping that we're going to be answering questions. That have been doing this a lot longer than I have. I've been on the job for 2 weeks now. Three weeks. So I'm very fortunate to have Ray Patterson, and Brad Wasson, and Renell and Zara who've been doing this much longer than. Oh, where's the microphone? This one? No. Normally I don't need microphones. No. Just kind of quickly on what we do have on our agenda, I guess it's just an update on cultivation, manufacturing, testing lab applications, an overview of the delivery ordinance, state regulations. So, as it relates to our current applications, and let me get this wrong, we have about 67 applications in, the bulk of which are for cultivation. 65. Both of which are for cultivation.
Okay. We have 65 applications in related. 2 of those are cultivation. A couple people have added also use permit. And then we have 3 applications that are straight manufacturing. We have no lands.
Proposed delivery. So last month, the City of Sacramento's Law and Legislation Committee heard a proposal for delivery. The proposal itself was to permit path forward for those existing dispensaries to begin operating the delivery system. I brought that item forward really as more of a discussion item, and the council's discussion. So what we are currently working on is developing a framework that would permit delivery. Delivery is currently happening in the city of Sacramento. There is maybe 180 deliveries. Forward and potentially receive a permit. Kind of framework that we are currently looking at would require just like cultivation, manufacturing, and testing. That is about as far as we have gotten. Maybe a kind of slightly different option or path for those existing dispensaries to deliver, but it may just be one single path where they would have to also go back and get a separate conditional use permit. It depends on whether the council would allow delivery out of a existing storefront, or if they want delivery to happen entirely from a non-public location. I guess that's a good way of putting it. Am I missing anything on that, Brad? The state has proposed their draft regulations. I don't want to attempt an overview of them. It's 300 and 400 some odd pages long. If you're interested in them, they're available online. There's also a budget trailer bill that is attempting to reconcile the two systems of adult use passed in Proposition 64 and the medical marijuana side adopted previously by the state. So right now there's a budget trailer bill to align those two systems that would allow the Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation at the state level to oversee both the medical and adult use side of cannabis. But again, if you're interested, they're all available online. I actually think they're pretty thoughtful, and it's I think a good starting point. Equity provisions. The council was approached by a group of community members that were interested in creating pathways for small businesses, women-owned businesses, and minority-owned businesses to begin to populate this space. So there's currently a working group of led by Councilmember Chenier and Councilmember Guerra, along with some of those coalition members that brought forth some of these ideas. They are currently working and developing some proposals that will be coming forward to the council. I don't know exactly when those would be, but those are currently being worked on, again, with the goal of creating more entry opportunities into the cannabis space. I think with that, Zara, do you have anything, or Brad, do you want to add anything? Yeah. So with that, we are here to answer any questions that you may have, and if we can't answer them, we will go and get the answer and get back to you. Yeah. Yeah, and we have a microphone for you also. So there's been an adopted fee schedule. Right now, I believe the delivery-only dispensary permit is in the neighborhood of $23,000 for the business operations permit, and then the conditional use permit is
in the fee and charge report, the way the planning conditional use permit is for marijuana. So right now, it's whatever the use permit is, it's the same base fee for all of them.
Oh, hi there. Over here. Yeah. Okay.
More bright today.
I have a question regarding to the neighborhood responsibility plan. We're currently doing the 1% fee for the city. However, some districts are more impact because of a high concentration. So the question is, can the district deny your project if you don't have an additional fee to the district besides the 1% city fee requirement? So in short, can the district deny the project if you don't do anything other than the 1% that's required by the city?
By district, what do you mean? Do you mean the city?
Districts, for example, District 2 and District 6 are more concentrated with the cultivation because there are more warehouses there.
Yeah.
I was contacted by one of the people in one of the district, they say that I have to do additional community service or neighborhood service other than the 1%. Otherwise, the project can be denied by the district.
So, just going to say this. You have a neighborhood responsibility plan. It's a completely separate plan. Actually, the property owner has the neighborhood responsibility plan. Everybody who has a business is required to have a neighborhood responsibility plan before they're going to get their business permit from revenue. Right now, and there has to be a nexus study done by the city to determine whether it's 1% or whatever the study comes up with. So just put that aside. Everybody's doing that, or you don't get a permit. You also, in order to get your permit, have to have a community relations plan. And you also have to hand that into revenue as part of your permit. You have to tell who your community relations representative is. And good idea as part of your conditional use permit to indicate what kind of community relations you are having. Now, the district isn't deciding, or the people in the district are not deciding who gets permits and who doesn't get permits, technically. You're going to a public hearing, and people have the opportunity at that public hearing to tell the hearing officer why you should get a permit, why you shouldn't get a permit. We're having good relations, we're having bad relations. The idea is you're out there meeting with community people and developing a community relations plan with them. So that's, I don't know which person I was talking to, but that's the two differences. So one, you have a little more control over. It may be where you are located, what you all perceive you need in order to have good community relations. The other is a requirement that's going to be placed upon you, and it's going to be part of a study, and you have very little, if any, control over what happens with that.
Hi, I was curious if you had an update on the timeline for people that have already submitted their CUP applications as well as their cultivation applications.
We're still hoping that those initial applications will be completed within inside of 6 months of when they were submitted. Is that fair? Yeah. There's 65. So there's 65 applications that they're currently working through. We have 7 planners. This is one piece of work that they are working on, and then there is one Joy Patterson, which. So
Hi.
We're gonna get to him.
Okay. You had said earlier, I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly, that there's going to be 60 deliveries and 30 of them are going to be brick and mortar anymore?
No.
Or what's the...
So right now, in the city of Sacramento, we currently have 30 dispensaries, brick and mortar storefront dispensaries. We have currently, depending on what website you read, somewhere, I'll just say around 180 either businesses or small individual businesses operating, delivering cannabis in the city of Sacramento. The council's asked us to come back with a process for which they could apply and become legal entities under the state structure. We are doing that. There's not been a discussion of a cap.
Hello. So if someone is going to do ultimately like the 22,000 square feet of canopy space for the business permit, but that's not going to happen for like 3 years, is there any option of phasing in those business permit fees that you can think of, any way to structure that? That's one question.
Get a smaller permit.
To start, and then
Reapply for a larger
but then
permit.
you have to pay the full large permit fee when you reapply, or
It
you
would-
modify.
CP. It would just be for the business operation. So when you went to renew, you'd renewing for something.
And then you pay the difference?
In your conditional use permit, show what you would like eventually.
Right.
But if you have to start out with a smaller permit, that's what you get from revenue. So, but you can show in your use permit what your ultimate goal is, and you can have a phasing plan as part of it.
Okay, and then thank you for that. And if you, when you're measuring, are you guys going to measure the square footage by like the building or actual canopy space?
It's based on canopy.
Okay.
Canopy.
So if you're not using the full building, you apply for the canopy.
It's based on canopy
'Kay.
of.
And last question, can you have like a manufacturing business permit and a cultivation business permit under one entity and one CUP, or?
So, one entity, that's going to all be regulated at the state level. Who can own what? Currently,
Right, so barring
you
the
can.
cross-licensing
So co-location
restriction.
of manufacturing and cultivation in a specific site would be allowed under current city code.
Okay.
It does require 2 different conditional use permits because they're 2 different activities.
Okay, thank you.
If we have,
Sir, microphone.
oh, well, I can talk loud.
But-
If your building is 22,000 square feet, but it has 3 separate units, like an A, B, C, their own power, everything, is the CUP on the whole building and then get the BOP on just one unit? Or can you get the CUP on the one unit and, both the CUP and the BOP on one unit?
Yeah, whatever you want to do. I mean, you could permit it for the parcel, right? It's a conditional use. The conditional use permit stays. It runs with the land, but you could propose that it
But
that
if it's one large building, a separate, unit A of the large building, you can't just get a smaller CUP just for that unit.
you could propose that.
On the CUP permit, while they're processing, I know we're waiting for a case number to put in our operator's permit. Will that be something that is emailed to us, or will we need to be calling to see when that case number is available?
Yeah. So if you have an application in, you have a what's called a Z file.
Okay, so that Z file number, we can file our operator's permit the minute we get that from them. Okay. And then last, if you're operating already as a manufacturer in the city, is there a date to apply by to continue operation during the application process?
Yeah. So that's currently an unpermitted activity, and
Well, like what we did with cultivation, there was a pre-registration, so you
We
could
don't-
continue
we don't-
operating during the process.
we don't have that currently for manufacturing. So I would encourage people to apply to become legal. No.
No, I won't get you in trouble. On the co-location with the cultivation and manufacturing, can we just submit the same plan that there's a site plan, and of course the CUP and the application would be different because it's a different business model, but do we have to submit another set of plans, or can you leverage the same plans? The blueprint.
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you on manufacturing.
Mhm.
If you don't know what you're manufacturing, don't bother applying.
That was
for
not the question.
No, but it.
I didn't
but
ask
it
a
is in
question
part
about
be-
manufacturing. I'm asking about
Submitting
the
the
site
plans.
plans. That's
Well,
what I'm
the
asking.
site
about.
plan-
Since we already submitted the
Right.
site plan,
Yeah.
do we need to give you the same copies again?
What you already have an application in, so
Yes.
you want to add. So what you would do, talk to your planner. You would add You don't need a new site plan and a new elevation.
Okay,
You need
that
a
was
new
the question.
floor plan, and you need a description of what your
I understand all of that,
that.
Joe. Yes.
That's what you need. So if you have a planner, talk to your planner, and they'll help you.
Okay. I think that answers my question. So on the delivery, I want to thank you for your leadership on that. Really appreciate you guys opening that up. It makes perfect sense so that the 180 and such entities that I'm sure are creating jobs and paying taxes are not displaced. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, I have a question. You're talking about delivery. What about delivery from the cultivation building to the dispensary? Do you need a special license?
So it's transportation. So there's kind of two pieces to that. Well, there's a couple more pieces, right? There's also the transportation piece of I'm going to take it from one legal business entity to another legal business entity, from a cultivation site to a testing facility, because that's going to be the first place it goes. And it's going to go from a testing facility potentially to a processing facility, and then end up at a retail facility of some sort, either be storefront or delivery. And those are all going to require a transportation business, and that's laid out in the state process as well. There's also distribution, which is transportation, but kind of on the wholesale scale of things.
In regards to the cultivation sites, is there any renewable energy requirements for the sites, and if so, what are they?
We've asked people to describe what their energy plan is. We don't have any particular renewable energy requirements.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is regarding the state licensing. How is that going to kick in, and is it going to overlap, or is it going to, the local licenses would merge into it? How would that play out?
Good question. The honest answer is we're still kind of figuring all of that out. So the state is kind of granted a lot of local control, and in some things they've kind of set the floor of what that minimum standard is, and given local governments the ability to go kind of above and beyond. Our ordinance is currently structured so that we can fold into the state structure. We're making some amendments to it to make that flow even better, but we're still kind of figuring out exactly where all those kind of overlaps are really going to be.
So, in essence, this will merge eventually? Is that the concept, or is it going to stay dual? State versus...
It will stay dual. That I can pretty much
so
promise you.
The
At least for
person
the
would end up
foreseeable
paying
future.
2 fees.
You'll need essentially to start a cannabis business. You'll need 3 things: a conditional use permit for your physical structure in the city. You'll need a local permit, and you'll need a state permit.
I see. Thank you.
Hi. If I'm making modifications only in regards to the interior of a building and not to the exterior, do I still need to submit the site plan and design review information, or can I just forego that altogether?
You need a building permit.
I mean...
Yeah. I mean, I
so
would...
do I have to submit that with the CUP, the site plan and design review?
Yes. Your site plan should be part of your conditional use permit application.
Even
should be what you intend to build.
Okay, so even if it's an already existing building, and
yes, with an already existing building, you need to submit site plan, floor plan, and elevations. You may not think you need changes, but there may be, based upon your floor plan and based upon what police and fire see and building, you may have exiting issues. There may be different security issues. So we need a full set of plans. And at a minimum, you could have a minor change. So it could be a minor site plan and design review.
Okay, so if I could just follow up to clarify, because I'm looking at the CUP, and on just so I know that I understand this correctly, if you're just doing an existing site, there's no changes, you don't have to like submit things such as the design concept narrative or the design guidelines checklist. But if we're making any changes, we should submit
You
those.
have to submit everything that's required. Your answer may be that there aren't any changes. So, but you need to fill out the application.
Okay.
Is there a sliding scale for different operations? Because I don't really imagine the 180 deliveries being able to afford that kind of price that the cultivators and manufacturers are paying for their CUP. Just like the big.
Yeah. So the price of the permit is based on expected enforcement. That is, I don't see that really deviating when it comes to delivery. I mean, the council may ask us to look at some other type of business permit, maybe based on the number of employees, that could maybe potentially reduce the cost of enforcement. But
I mean, a cultivation site's much different than just a little, civic driving around.
but it's similar to our dispensary permit. It's similar to the dispensary permit because it's a mobile. It's essentially
a mobile dispensary.
right. It's a dispensary.
Brick and mortar, so not having.
No, it's a brick and mortar. You will have an address. You will have. It's not going to be a guy and a Toyota Camry and a bag of weed. That is not what it's going to look like. You will have an address.
Earlier, you had mentioned that it would be a non. But it can be a non-business address, or however you.
No, it will likely. Again, the council still needs to formulate this, but right now, I would imagine the zoning and distance requirements not being too unsimilar for manufacturing and cultivation.
If there's an existing cultivation site that's transferring hands in a sale, is the new owner required to get another CUP if there's already been a CUP granted on the building, or is there some sort of change of ownership status that has to be?
The conditional use permit runs with the property.
Okay, so there wouldn't be the same...
It's a land use entitlement. So it stays with the property. You don't get to take it with you.
Okay, so if I have a client who's purchasing a building that has an existing grow, then...
Well, they don't have a conditional use permit because we haven't issued any for cultivation.
Oh.
So
okay.
they might be
there
cultivating on
There
site.
weren't any in the past issued. There's never been any issued within the city.
No. Nope.
Okay. Well, that answers that question.
We did a registry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that they are on that registry, and folks that are on that registry can continue to cultivate if they have their application in. But no one has a conditional use permit right now for cultivation or manufacturing.
Okay. My second question would be with regard to canopy. If there is a 10,000 square foot building that the cultivator intends to break down into separate grow rooms, and part of that's going to be for clones, part of that's going to be for a veg room, and then some of it's going to be for flowering rooms, are they going to calculate this square footage of the flowering rooms only, or is it every room that they build out in the space that could potentially have mature plants in it?
Yeah, so that's a very technical question. So canopy is also defined by state law, so I would encourage you to go and look at the definition of canopy.
I did, but the way it's articulated says at any time, that the square footage at any time, is that, I don't know what level of time we're measuring that by. The potential at any time, or what my clients plan to grow at any time?
I can circle back with you. I think I'd like to do a little bit more reading, but the bottom line is apply for what you intend to do and apply for what you want. Certainly, as it applies to or relates to your CUP. Mm-hmm. If you intend to grow 10,000 square feet, or that's what you have room for, for your dream grow, I would put down 10,000, and then as to what the state definition kind of is, and once we get answers to all of that, then obviously those would apply.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm just going to add, the use permit doesn't talk about canopy. The revenue permit and the state permit discusses canopy. So you could be showing a 30,000 square foot building, which you have an office in part of it, and part of it's going to be your grow area. But what I'd encourage you is if the state has a maximum canopy size, that you're showing when you ultimately come in and get your revenue permit and your state permit that you meet state and city regulations regarding canopy. I hope that makes sense to you all.
Hi, my question is about the actual testing out here in the city. So the state released all the regulations that they're looking at right now. My question is, are you guys going to basically take those one-to-one as far as like analytics required, things along those lines? Or because in the ordinance right now, there's just a bunch of things marked reserved, which we're kind of assuming is to be filled in later once the state dials in what they're asking for. Is that a fair assumption, or?
Yeah, so there's obviously some large chunks of, the industry that have yet to be kind of the regulations defined, and I think that's and as it relates to pesticides and all of that, that's certainly the case. It's hard to speculate exactly where the city would go. My guess is that this is going to be a very technical and highly regulated part of the industry, and if I had to make an assumption based on kind of my previous conversations with council members, I think we would probably mirror the state as it relates to testing and other health-related regulations.
Okay, perfect. That's because we've just been kind of going on hypotheticals right now, so it's definitely big for us too in the testing side of it. So yeah, anything you guys have would be pretty helpful for us. So.
Hi, I had a question on the manufacturing. I was wondering if you guys were going to be doing different tiers for the manufacturing in that regard.
So at the last Law and Legislation Committee, the council did ask that we look at that. And I've just started to kind of wrap my head around that. Love anyone's thoughts and feedback around that. One thing that did occur to me is, how do we encourage the connection between all of our local, restaurant owners and all the creative people we have here in the food class to start businesses in this space. And certainly that top-level manufacturing permit that's intended for large extraction or maybe serious commercial manufacturing isn't really applicable to someone who wants to start a small food company in a commercial kitchen. So that's one thing I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around right now. But if anyone has thoughts on that, please shoot me an email.
Yeah, I would love to personally get together with you. I make aromatherapy products and topicals, and would love to help in any way that I can answer those questions.
This is probably a question for Joy. Joy, it's coming back to the NRP. Just want to be clear on this. You had the option to contribute the 1% or pay the NRP fee that will be established by a development impact fee, right? I'm right here.
It really isn't a question for me, other than
I'm just reading right from the application.
Right.
It's one or the other.
You're required to submit it as part of. You're required to submit it. You get to choose one of those two options.
Right.
You'll be entering as part of your revenue permit into an agreement with the city manager to do one of those two.
Right.
things.
I'm talking about the CUP right now, not the revenue side.
So here's the deal.
Yeah.
You've met it with your application.
Thank you very much.
Hi. About what he was just just asking about the manufacturing and having tiers. The state's tiering idea looks pretty good. Have you thought of kind of mirroring that at all?
That's one of the things that we're looking at.
Okay. And can I get your email address?
JDEVLIN
Dad, write this down.
at cityofsacramento.org.
Okay.
I give you a business card, but I actually don't have any.
Okay. I have one more question.
I just got a computer.
I'm just curious about, you were saying that the fees that you're charging are kind of large, especially like when you're looking at, say, Denver. The comparison is in like 30,000 for manufacturing here and to 7,000 in Denver, and you're saying it's for law enforcement. And I'm just curious why you think there's going to be so much crime, or where you got this. I mean, why do we need so much law enforcement when the crime went down in Denver? Just curious.
Well, so I love Denver. I've been there a number of times. I went there specifically last year to go look at how they kind of do cannabis, and I'll even, you'll hear me talk, and I'll talk about Denver. I'll never compare Denver to Sacramento. I use Denver as a point of reference.
Sure. That's what I'm doing.
And,
so.
Well, right. So Denver crime didn't necessarily go down.
Right?
It
went down
that,
1%.
Hold on. So the crime that we are attempting to address through our fees isn't necessarily only around that single manufacturer. It is around the cannabis industry as a whole. Right now, one of the things that is most important to the council is protecting our neighborhoods. So right now, we have somewhere around as many as 1,000 illegal cannabis grows in residential homes. And I'm not talking about my mom with like her pot plant in the backyard. Okay, maybe not my mom. She's gonna love that one. It's her birthday today too. But these are commercial scale operations. They are blight, they are hazard, and they generate a lot of calls for service. And so that is one of the reasons why we have a significant law enforcement component to our fee. It's a problem, and it needs to be addressed. And this is an industry that, my hope is that through the permitting and regulation, we can create market conditions that suppress the competitiveness of some of these illegal grows. But ultimately, we are and will be developing strategies to eradicate them from our neighborhoods.
Okay.
But yes, we are looking at the state structure for different tiers of licensing, and that's exactly what the council asked for 2 weeks ago.
Great. I'll get in touch with you. Thank you.
So I have a site that I already have a conditional use permit application in for, and we are expanding with another building on the site not to exceed our conditional use permit canopy limit. So it sounds like I need to go meet with the planner. Is that something I just need to have our engineer draw up the proposed building and they can just add that? Or is there some additional steps I should do before I go?
You're adding a physical structure? You're adding a new building.
Another building, correct. We have a smaller building that right now on an industrial property that we want to add additional buildings to.
Yeah, I would go sit down with your planner and walk through all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, so forgive my ignorance. I'm still kind of catching up to speed on this legislation. So my question is about Type 10, Type 10A, and 11 permits and sort of the status on those. I've been hearing a lot of different things online, and I just kind of want to know the status of those as they stand today.
At the state level? I mean, so we currently have, again, 65 applications in, 63 are for cultivation permits. I can't tell you exactly who's applied for what kind of canopy square footage in their CUP. We have 30 of them. There aren't any more.
Right, that's my question. What's the status of new permits for new dispensaries?
So delivery dispensary is going to be the next conversation that the city council has. We're currently crafting that ordinance. It's hopefully will return to the Law and Legislation Committee, the Policy Committee, in July, and that would be, I think, the next opportunity for the addition of any sort of dispensary, but it would be delivery only.
I had a question on pre-registered buildings as far as purchasing them. If it was pre-registered and you purchase the building, are you going to be able to actually consume that and continue to cultivate, or no? Because I've heard both stories, and I've called the city, and they've given me kind of like both answers. So I'm confused by that. You can't really. And the question being is because people have registered they pre-registered buildings that they didn't even have ownership or leases to.
Okay, for the registration, currently it's supposed to be a nonprofit entity that's doing the cultivation. So if the nonprofit entity is still there cultivating, then that would be fine.
Concerning delivery businesses, and you're basically saying it's going to follow the plan of the BOP. There's insurance requirements that are currently in place. Are they adding additional requirements? Because this is a whole new exposure and a problem that's not really being discussed, and I'm just curious about it.
Insurance requirements for whom?
Delivery.
But for whom exactly?
The business owner.
The business owner. The state has set out some draft regulations. We may have. It's on the. It's a bullet item right now on my whiteboard. I can't answer that question right now. I mean, I think in that case we're really going to be looking towards the state for some.
We've been actually talking to the state and helping with
some,
it. So if there's anything that's changing, I'd love to talk to you about it, because we've been working with road safety and discussed a couple things. And the concern I had is that it isn't being addressed. And if a child gets hit, we all have bad situation. So it needs to be addressed and be taken very seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's probably 4 or 5 kind of bullets on my whiteboard right now that, have, literally kind of a big arrow at it. It says, state ? And that's one of them. I think as it applies to all of any kind of cannabis regulation, right? So the state has set the floor and has given an amount of local control that we can layer on to make it fit our community. And if there are things that staff feels are insufficient, we'll be making policy recommendations to the council for them to consider.
Is it coming from a local level? Because we're working with the city of San Jose right now. We're working with certain cities because that's what the cities are telling us. They're reflecting to the state, and they're almost going back to local jurisdiction. I'm just curious. So nothing's changed in 5 months. I know there's a lot going on.
Well, the state regs just came out, so cities like San Jose that already permitted delivery, they had to kind of answer some of these questions, and that's been the case on every front up until recently. The locals had to answer all of these questions, and if they, wasn't a clear answer, we had to make up the best answer that we could. So now that we have some state regs, hopefully those will be sufficient to address the industry as a whole statewide. If they're not, we'll layer on what we need to for Sacramento.
I had a question. You answered the gentleman, 30 dispensaries, that's it, in the city of Sacramento. I currently own a pharmacy. We're a compounding pharmacy, and we want to run a dispensary as a pharmacy because we get so many we work with children's hospitals, we work with veterinarians, and they all want us to work with medical cannabis. We can't bring the cannabis into the pharmacy, obviously, because it's federal DEA 1. I'll lose all my licensure. So we need to take our skills to the cannabis world. So, but the problem is there's 30, that's it, no more kind of thing. And everyone I've talked to says, oh, it's great the way you're describing it, running it as a pharmacy and doing it. That all sounds wonderful. Unfortunately, we have a 30 cap. is the 30 cap ever going to be addressed? Or do I just wait around till January and then throw my hat into the ring, or, you know?
So I think there's a two-part answer to your question potentially. So yes, we have 30 dispensaries. There has not yet been a conversation of expanding that number, in part because we haven't had the conversation of what are we going to do about adult use, which may or may not necessitate or benefit from increasing that number. We also haven't had the conversation of on-site consumption, something else that is permitted within the state law. I guess my question to you would be, are the patients, consuming it on-site, or are you delivering it to them?
Neither.
Or to the hospitals? Or
Patient would come in, pick it up. It's just like a regular pharmacy, doctor, pharmacy, pharmacist, patient kind of thing.
Could it be delivered to them?
In theory, it could be if we wanted to go that route.
So
I mean, if we
delivery only
thought that was
dispensaries are going to be
appropriate.
the next batch of dispensary permits.
So
that
if we
open
were
up?
a dispensary, had the brick and mortar and delivered everything out, then we could be a delivery dispensary type thing. Is that?
So again, there's whether or not and how an existing dispensary could or could not deliver is yet to be answered. The council's asked us to come forward with a policy to create an option for a new dispensary, which is a non-storefront dispensary which delivers directly. So that's the next piece that's going to be coming out. Adding new dispensaries, I can't even begin to forecast how that conversation would go or when it might happen. I think when we have the conversation around adult use is going to be maybe when that question kind of begins to get addressed. But
We have parents that want us to compound medication for their children. Like I said, we have so many people wanting us to bring it, but we can't get past the 30 cap.
Yep.
And I've had people say, it's a great idea, just do it, just start doing it. But I mean, I have so many licenses to lose, there's no way I'm going to take that on. Just go out and do it kind of thing.
One more right here. Hi, I have a question in regards to transportation as it pertains to distribution centers and if you're transporting marijuana to testing labs. Let's say a driver gets stopped by the police officer, and I'm not sure if there's guidance out there already, but what exactly should they show to police officers in order to protect themselves?
a driver's license. So the transportation piece of this, the distribution piece of this, is yet to be figured out. I mean, yeah. I mean, we haven't. Yeah. I mean, we will eventually, I believe, get around to permitting delivery, and that may or may not even, we may even do like an ID card to make, to do shortcuts for our law enforcement. We may do the same thing with delivery. Again, just to make enforcement a little bit easier. We're still trying to answer all those questions. But I can't give you a legal opinion as to. Yeah, and the state will issue licenses also, and this is actually distribution and transportation very well could be in an area where the state regs around that are figured out in advance of us being able to get our permit, because it's on my list. I'll be honest, like transportation and distribution are not at the top of it. We've got some other irons in the fire.
You had mentioned the Pathways group for the women and minorities. Could you give the contact information again for that if you wanted to become involved? Or who's handling the support for that?
Yeah, so it's council members Jay Chenier and Eric Guerra. Their phone numbers are 808-7005 for Councilmember Chenier and 808-7006 for Councilmember Guerra.
Hi there. I just have a question regarding to deliveries, dispensary. What is the distance for that? Can you deliver out of the city or within like to another city, or what's the limit for that?
So currently it's an illegal activity.
Correct.
Hypothetically, if we had an ordinance on the books that is, I don't believe that I think we're going to be silent on that. We'll defer to state law. And so right now in the budget trailer bill, it aligns the medical with the with Prop 64, and they've taken out the prohibition of delivery into jurisdictions that either have not regulated or have banned it. So in theory, if the council adopted a delivery-only dispensary ordinance and we were silent on it, the default would be state law, and you would be allowed to deliver to other places, provided that that is how it was adopted at the state. Again, the budget trailer bill is still under consideration.
For the timeline with distribution and transportation, what is your timeline for that in terms of like coming up with the ordinance and just to discuss it?
Honestly, I don't have one. July is my timeline for delivery, for a code rewrite, for amendments to our residential grow process, for amendments to like literally like 15 things are kind of on the list, and distribution and transportation is not is kind of near the bottom of that. My hope is to have everything done by January, by December, so that when the state regs are when the state is ready to start issuing licenses, we will be ready also.
What's the likelihood of actually getting to it by December in terms of distribution? And,
I think it's good. I don't think distribution and transportation are going to be particularly complicated policy matters. So,
one follow-up question. I just remember for delivery dispensary, do you need the same location? Where it has to be 600 feet away from school?
We have yet to adopt those. My guess is, I think what will be proposed to the council, put it that way, what will be proposed to the council, or at least to the committee, will probably have similar distance requirements to cultivation and manufacturing.
Hi. I know currently there's no cap on cultivation applications, but it's been stated in the past if there was a lot of applications, the staff would request there be a temporary stoppage. So how would that look like? Would it go to the city council agenda and the city council vote on that?
Right. So there would be a change in our policy and our ordinance that would require a multitude of steps that would begin at the Law and Legislation Committee and then ultimately to the council. Those discussions haven't materialized. We had 170 people express interest in the cultivation when we opened up the registry, and we've had 63 cultivation applications. So I personally don't feel like we're being flooded.
So it would be voted on by a commission or the council to
I'm sorry?
stop it? So it would get voted on whether to stop it or not by the council?
It would be by council direction.
Okay. And also, previously you guys had stakeholder meetings on YouTube. Are you guys going to stop uploading it?
This will be up there too.
Okay.
Oh, great.
I found out today too.
Hi, how you doing? This is kind of a follow-up to her question. As far as tenant improvements go, we're getting the bigger license, the 22,000. But as far as tenants improvements go, it looks like SMUD is about 6 to 7 months out, and some other things are a little farther out too. Are we able to do it in phases? Are we able to pay for the whole permit and do, let's say, 4,000 square feet, phase 1, 12,000 the next phase, but be able to operate? So that way we actually have capital coming in.
For your business operations permit?
Yes. Are we able to get like a liquor license where we get actual conditions on that. So part of our condition would be we need to get done with our phase 2 in, whatever, 3 months or whatever we're working with SMUD with.
Give your information to Christine or Zara and me after the meeting, and let me get a real answer to that. I don't want to just say no off the top of my head.
Oh, great, thank you. Hey, Joe, since the CUPs run with the land, will there be a standard time period for those? I assume they're not indefinite.
In terms of processing them?
No, the length of the CUP. Will they be for 5 years,
they're just
10 years? They wouldn't be indefinite.
Runs with the land. They're like any use permit. So if you discontinue operation for, I'm thinking it's like 2 years, I think, then your permit expires. So and like you said, the permit doesn't belong necessarily to the cultivator. So if one cultivator leaves and another cultivator comes in and they can meet the same conditions of approval, then the use permit continues on. Similar to, like, let's say somebody got a use permit for a church. So the church was approved with conditions. That church decides to move to a bigger location or something, and another congregation decides to come in. If they can meet the conditions of approval, they can open up shop and they can have a church. Same with cultivators.
We have the first church that grows cannabis now, and I'm waiting for it.
Hi, Joe. How are you doing? So I have a question. I know you don't know the timeline, and so I'm just kind of like more nebulous. If, let's say you have something in July for delivery, non-storefront delivery, that you're going to propose to the council or to Law and Ledge?
It'd be Law and Ledge, and then hopefully, council a couple weeks after that.
A couple weeks later. Okay. And then if it's adopted, then that would go into effect immediately or at some further time down the road?
No, that's 30 days.
30 days.
Right. So there's a planning, because there's going to be a Title 17 element to that. So it may be closer to a month, depending on how the calendars line up.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, Joe. What is the deadline for manufacturing application?
We don't have one.
You don't have one?
We just opened it up.
Mm-hmm. See if there's a deadline put on yet. I heard you say earlier you're marinating. I can't remember the word you said about doing tiers for manufacturing. Do you think that businesses should wait and see what you're going to do, or go ahead and apply?
That's a business decision. I don't want to opine on that. I think, I don't know what I'm even going to kind of really put forward at this moment. I'm just I'm going to look at the state. I'm going to talk to some, people who've started, small food industry related businesses in the city to get an understanding of what their needs are. So, I'd love to have that piece wrapped into the any amendments that come forward to council in July, or not to council, but to law and legislation in July. But I'm not optimistic about that at the moment.
This is a follow-up question for the licensing transfer. I guess the licensing for the establishment. Now, if one cultivator, for example, has that land license for cultivating, and then he sells it and goes to a different individual as a cultivator. Now, if that cultivator doesn't meet those provisions, is there a timeline set to have them be able to meet those provisions to continue the business?
So you're talking about the conditional use permit process.
Correct. Uh-huh.
So that would be the 2 years gap of operation, right? So if you cease operation, the clock starts to tick on that CUP. So, and at 2 years and a day, the CUP is then invalidated.
And next question is that once they meet the condition, can they add additional, I'd say, space? Is that, or if their plan's different and differ from what the original plan was, do we have to submit something
So there's a process for
Uh-huh.
that. Go see the planning department. There's a process for, obviously, what is it? Modification of a conditional use permit.
Now, is that going to align with your monitoring or the marijuana monitoring agency? So if we submit it to the city, are they going to then in return notify that monitoring agency, or is it that we have to submit it to both at the same time? Or
Well, if you just want to, build on, whatever amount of
Mhm.
space, so you can have an office or put in a couch, and it's not changing your use, then you really only need to deal with planning and zoning. If you're coming in and you're adding manufacturing
Mhm.
or increasing your canopy or whatever the case may be, yeah, you'll be talking to both of us.
thank you.
Quick question. Who qualifies as a qualified professional for purposes of the security plan? We've used registered architects, for example, to do diagrams and drawings, but who is a qualified professional for purposes of the security plan? Can that just be the company that put it in, like ADT or a professional company? Who is a qualified professional?
We don't have a list of pre-qualified vendors. Our police department will be, and as well as our office, will be evaluating all of the elements of each proposal, including the security plan. So we're going to be really working with our police department to ensure that these are safe and secure facilities. There are industry best practices out there that are not unrelated to securing any type of commercial structure, regardless of activity.
So I think if we just describe what we're doing or use the name of the professional company and their product, is that sufficient?
It may be sufficient, yes.
I have 3 questions on behalf of our neighborhood association. One of our board members says that in the regulations, it says the city is fine with approving a marijuana cultivation facility next to a transitional kindergarten, but not a non-traditional transitional kindergarten. Can you dispel that notion or just speak about that?
Can you ask that question again? I'm sorry.
It says in the guidelines, the city is fine approving a cultivation site next to a traditional kindergarten, but not a non-transitional kindergarten. I couldn't find that in the language myself. Transitional, I'm sorry, not traditional.
Yeah, so the state has a definition of school that has distance requirements. We have to follow those. Everyone else in the city has to follow those as well. But that is the definition of kind of K through 12 public and private schools.
Okay.
Does it include a preschool?
So I would think, and you can check with the state if you want, but that if the school in question is licensed by Community Care Licensing, which license daycares, and if they're saying that their traditional or transitional kindergarten doesn't fall into the state definition of kindergarten, but it's preschool, then that wouldn't count. So preschools are not part of the distance requirement.
Okay. And then second question is, can you tell me when the estimated completion of the Nexus study will be? Just
Yeah.
ballpark.
Well, we haven't started it.
Okay.
So I'm currently just, begin drafting what will be an RFP. It will go out, it'll be circulated, come back. There'll be a selection process, and then there'll probably be some amount of time, somewhere between probably 6 and 12 months for the completion of that study.
Okay.
So It could be the end of. It could be the end of 18.
End of 18, okay. And then last question, can you clarify some of the ambiguity around the neighborhood impact fee, specifically, where it says to mitigate the adverse impacts of the development? What does that actually mean?
So the council, the neighborhood responsibility plan was adopted under the belief that there were negative secondary impacts associated with some of this industry. We are going to conduct a nexus study to measure those impacts, and and so right now an operator that wishes to move forward has essentially two choices. One, wait for our study to be completed, or contribute an amount that we think is aligned with the impact, which is 1%.
Are there any tentative plans to add closed-loop systems for manufacturing extraction to the allowed?
For volatile?
Yeah, volatile.
Hasn't even been discussed.
My question is because, there's other areas that are adding them, and it's a whole segment of products that essentially will make manufacturers in this area less competitive because the margin on those products is a lot better than what you can do with the other non-volatile systems.
Maybe someday. I can't tell you right now. That hasn't really been. No one on the city council has, come tap me on the shoulder and been like, hey, move forward with permitting volatile extraction.
Well, I think there's plenty, if you look around, there's plenty of closed loop systems all through manufacturing, in the Sacramento area for extracting all sorts of products. It's not like if done in the proper way, it's not dangerous in any way, but it'll definitely make manufacturers here less competitive.
And just to make sure, on the deliveries, they have to be attached to a brick and mortar, but they do not have to operate out of that brick and mortar nor store supplies at that brick and mortar. They can have a separate CUP in business, just must be attached to one of the brick and mortars in the city, correct?
No. So not no to all of your question, just I think the beginning part of it. So right now we have 30 dispensaries and 180 delivery companies. No one is currently permitted to deliver. There may be a path forward for the existing dispensaries to deliver. It may or may not, this will be a council decision, allow delivery out of that storefront. Conversely, there may be a requirement for those existing dispensaries to operate similarly to a delivery-only dispensary and have a separate second off-site location that meets other distance requirements.
Okay. But that's not set yet?
Nope.
For the question of delivery dispensary, is that like something new, or for example, if I want to open one, can I do that, or there's a limit license like you're saying with the dispensary only 30?
We haven't even created the process for it yet, so I don't even have a permit to issue. We don't have a process for it yet. That's what I hope the Law and Legislation Committee will be discussing in July.
Okay, and for vertical licensing, can that particular delivery dispensary be in the same parcel as cultivation and manufacturing?
We don't. We are silent on co-location. It's as long as you have and obtain all the necessary conditional use permits and operating permits. Yes, in theory, cultivation, although delivery only dispensary. Don't have an answer to that one yet. So co-location of manufacturing and cultivation can happen. I'm not sure about delivery-only dispensaries.
Oh, and also, is there a limit in terms of like how much you can carry per delivery?
So that right now there's some guidelines around that at the state level. That will certainly be the floor. Sacramento may take a more restrictive approach, but I think right now the dollar valuation is $3,000.
Oh, 3,000. So you don't go by the pound, you go by the amount of
Value.
Value. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is regarding the radius restrictions, especially for the parks. I know it's 600, but also I remember Councilman discussing at variance. At what level or what condition would essentially trigger that? If somebody is like 400 feet and the requirement is 600 feet being away from the park, can essentially variance be applied, or how does that work, variance?
So there is a process for deviating from some of those distance requirements. So, and there is, I think good reason for some of that. We can't. It's difficult to write a perfect policy and ensure that these distance requirements are actually applicable. So there's a process for that. And if you want to deviate from that requirement, it's going to require a higher level of review. So currently that conditional use permit is a zoning administrator's conditional use permit. If you want to deviate from those standards, your process is going to be begun at the planning commission level. It also means that the appeal of that planning commission decision is the city council, who gets the final say on that. I tell you a good reason why, to create kind of a process for that is 600 feet. I could be 500 feet to open up my cultivation or manufacturing site, but I'm 500 feet from a park, but I'm across the street but I'm across the freeway. I'm still 500 feet, so I can't go here, but there's no way to get. I'm not near the park. I'm on the other side of the freeway or other side of railroad tracks, or so there are reasons why we kind of created, I think a process for the application of, reasonable human, thought into our application to the policy. It's really difficult to just say this is the number and under no uncertain circumstances.
So are you saying is this for discussion at the council level?
It's
The
already-
variance?
It's already been adopted.
I see. So that it kicks into that level and that's where it goes.
Right.
For determination.
Right. So if I wanted to open a cultivation site and I was 500 feet, I didn't meet the distance requirement, my application would go to the planning commission, which is a 11 member, 12 member, 13 member body, 13 member body, who makes land use decisions every other week.
So it makes it a little bit more difficult and more costly.
Yes.
But the chances are the same.
I would say, I want to know about difficult. I think that's a relative term. I think it is a more strict scrutiny.
I see. Thank you.
My question is having a license to carry a concealed weapon going to interfere with participation in this industry? And I don't know if they're police officers at the end or if those are fire department, but if you can't answer that, if I could get some perspective from that end, if they are.
If having a CCW?
Yes.
I don't have an answer to that at the moment.
I can answer that. And federal firearm laws prohibit users of controlled substances under federal acts from possessing firearms. So if you go to the sheriff's department and look at your CCW, are all the yes/no things that most people don't read, they just check that all the way down. One of those says if you're a regular user of a controlled substance, including marijuana, if you check yes to that, you will be categorically disqualified. The state turns that all over to the. So it's only as a user. What's that? It's only as a user.
That's a very good question. I think I'll put that on my list of things to answer.
I got a couple questions regarding to the manufacturing ordinance. Just need some clarification. One is on the renewal process. The city manager may impose additional conditions on the manufacturing permit, including the maximum amount of marijuana and marijuana products allowed on the site, number and types of equipment, and security features. Can you elaborate on that at all? That's on the renewal part where the city manager gets involved.
So when it says city manager, that means the city manager and staff. It's, Howard Chan isn't coming out to, personally inspect or weigh your marijuana. I think the provision like that is in there to, leave open additional regulations that may be necessary at some point in the future.
Fair enough. That's what I thought it might be for. To give a little protection, I imagine, on both sides. The other question I have is about the collective and co-op manufacturing line. A marijuana manufacturing business must operate as a cooperative or collective of 4 or more members who associate a particular location to collectively or cooperatively manufacture marijuana and operate on a not-for-profit basis. But then below it, it says this section shall now apply to any marijuana manufacturing business that is licensed by the state of California to conduct commercial manufacturing. You're going to have like a year and a half window in there where you're asking us to operate as a nonprofit collective until the state issues our licenses to operate as a commercial manufacturing for profit. How does that work?
Yeah, and that is so that Brad's not our attorney, but he reminded me that is what that is what our attorney said, and I think. It's possible that we might have some greater clarity coming out as we kind of update the code, but yeah, a lot of us are in some kind of ambiguity at the moment.
Are you asking us to apply as a nonprofit?
I think that's the only way you can operate right now.
It's the only way we can operate right now? Okay. And then it flips over once the state licensing
goes.
And
then once you have that once you have that ability at the state level, you can come back and apply as a for-profit corporation.
Okay.
I have 2 questions on the variance you were talking about. I was told that was only going to be applied to parks and not schools, since the state doesn't give any variation on being next to a school. Is that true? Or
that is true.
So you're when you said school, you meant just parks only, right? Like your freeway thing with 500 feet away, but it's a school.
Parks only.
Parks only is the only way that's going to. Okay. And then my next question, as far as submitting our application, we have till June 30th. My question being, with the security plan, kind of everything kind of in the air, they saying, don't rush your application, make sure it's complete. Are they going to kick us out because we don't have the security plan exactly how you guys want it tailored, or is that something that we could submit and they could work with us on, since there's no set standard on those?
Right. So I would encourage you to submit an application as complete as possible before the deadline. If we need to have a discussion around parts of the plan, whatever it may be, we'll have those conversations. In your plan, we'll come back with essentially what are comments of, we would recommend this, not this. And
Okay, thank you.
On the operating application, it's not as thorough as the CUP. So I was wondering, how many copies for the floor plan and the size for the site plan do you need?
for the business operations permit?
Yeah. How many copies for the floor plan and site plan do you need?
Yeah, if they're online, just one, but
Just one?
Yeah.
And any size, or 8.5 by 11, or like what we submitted for CUP?
eight and a half, there you go. 8.5 by 11 PDF works. Hopefully high enough res, so people that need glasses like me can, zoom in on it a little bit.
And if we're not up and running yet, do we need to have the budget and price list and everything, or just make it up what we think, because we don't have it up and running?
For
cultivation,
for the business operations permit. Yeah. What do you foresee happening?
Okay. And also, can testing and cultivation be in the same building?
I don't think so, but I think that's a state requirement. There can't be any, right? Testing is going to be its own standalone pillar within the industry. There may be other parts of that distribution may be its own standalone pillar. They're still fighting that out, but I think it's pretty clear that testing is going to, like the co-location question, if it's in the same building, I don't want to say no. I mean, happy to look and get that answer, but in terms of like ownership, there can't be any co-ownership of, if you own testing, that's the only thing you do.
Switched your arm?
I didn't, yeah. The manufacturer license, I only have one item, but I'm already licensed as a baker, so I have all the necessary permits and all that. Now, with the cottage food license, is that another license that I'm gonna have to get other than the one I have? Because that's kind of expensive too.
Your license as a
Keita's Cookie, a baker.
A baker.
But I made an ointment, so I want to market my ointment. I'm not into. I don't want to be a grower, cultivator.
Right. So that is, you are the exact type of manufacturer. You're a manufacturer.
Yes.
Right? So you are the exact type of manufacturer that I'm trying to kind of understand and, at council's direction, create a barrier to entry that is potentially easier and appropriate for your scale of business and industry. So I'm getting there.
Okay, so
But
I didn't know the manufacturer license was available, so I'm gonna apply today. So with that, I'm because just like any other business license, you have to have different permits and or license to match whatever you're doing. So with like I said, just the ointment. So I would have to apply for another business license, because each of them you have to have, state what you're doing under that. So
right,
you don't have.
But because you're a licensed baker.
So you have under manufacturer just one. So like you're saying, you're working that out of what the fee will cost. Is it a standard fee right now, and is that for the 2 years? Is it based on what you make a year, as far as how much it's going to cost?
So right now there's if you want to be a manufacturer, there's one path and there's two pieces that you need: conditional use permit for where you're doing it, and a business operations permit to do it. There may be another option of like a small business manufacturer license that will come out, but you'll still need the conditional use permit as well.
I'm going to ducktail over that. And you're talking about doing the tiers. Are you open to a incubator type situation where there's one large manufacturer and a few smaller manufacturers in the same building?
So we've actually talked about an incubator model at the city. The short answer to that is yes. So your conditional use permit for manufacturing is a land use entitlement that goes with the property. If you want to have one manufacturer in there, that's great. If you want to have 4 manufacturers in there, that's fine. They're each going to need their own separate business permit. Um, Correct. So the conditional use permit is for the property that says you can do manufacturing here. The business operations permit is for each individual business. Now, yeah, and so if a manufacturer, if two manufacturers wanted to kind of co-locate, if you will, that could happen.
So the lady was talking about how she is a licensed baker and that she makes an ointment. And so if a person, as we move forward, doesn't know about the fact that they have to have this manufacturing permit that you talked about, and they don't have it, and they have these ointments in their house that they're making and so forth, are they going to be penalized? Will they be, they're stopped by the police for something in their car, and they have this stuff in their trunk for some reason, and for some reason the cop, asked them could he search the car or whatever? Could they be penalized, and could they go to jail for this? And how are people going to know that this is something that you guys are going to enforce?
So I don't give legal advice.
But you are
when I am
that
stopped by a cop, I am like 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, So I would consult an attorney for that first round of questions. If somebody is making something, at some point the track and trace system is going to be very difficult for anyone just making stuff at home to sell it anywhere. The track and trace program is going to require that all products go to a testing facility, that it comes from a licensed producer. They're not even going to test it if it doesn't come from a licensed manufacturer. And a dispensary isn't going to sell it unless it's coming from a licensed manufacturer and it's been tested. So at some point, the track and trace system is going to essentially eliminate the market, the legal market for that. Yeah, as far as like getting pulled over and what you can be in possession of, calling them.
What about commercial? How some bakers or whoever, they'll go out and rent spots just to
Conditional use permit.
do whatever. Is that allowable?
You need a condition. If I owned a kitchen and I had 5 people baking out of it and they each took a 4-hour shift, I would need a conditional use permit for my kitchen. Each person operating out of that kitchen would need a business operations permit. We've worn them down. Not this guy. This guy's like, I got one more question.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry about that. The more I know, the less trouble I get into, right? For if you have one parcel and that parcel happens to have 2 conditional use permit, one for manufacturing and one for cultivation, can you just switch back and forth? Just for example, can you turn both into a cultivation at one time because you have a cultivation permit on that parcel? Or can you actually turn both of them into a manufacturing business operation at a later point?
So this question is, could you flex the space essentially if you had 2 conditional use permits for manufacturing and cultivation? Could you flex the space back and forth internally?
Bless you.
Yeah, so that's a very specific question. I think you need 2 conditional use permits to do each activity.
So you have both of them.
We'd have to see the proposal. Is this something that you envision doing like every other month, or
I'm just saying if manufacturing is not doing that well, maybe you want to
Yeah, so there's a process. So if you came in and said half this is for manufacturing, half this is for cultivation, and one of them just isn't doing well, changing kind of that floor plan, if you will, but maintaining your conditional use permits would simply require modification of one of those conditional use permits.
When is the estimated first public zoning administration hearing?
Those applications are currently being reviewed. I don't think we have a date yet. But if yours is first, you will be the first to know. Wow.
Regulatory body, Department of Consumer Affairs, there, like the Stakeholder, medicine, pharmacy, all that. Sorry. The regulatory on this, either statewide or even with the city, is that going to be through DCA, Department of Consumer Affairs, and will they have like a board of cannabis or?
So there's a Bureau of Medical Cannabis, Bureau of Medical Regulation. The pieces of the industry will be regulated by the Department of Consumer Affairs, Department of Food and Ag, and and the Department of Public Health. So,
depending on where you fit in.
Depending on what activity it is.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I'm not tired yet. Anybody? Come on in. I'm only at 4.9 thousand steps.
This is more of a comment. So I think one of the big challenges for any delivery companies are going to be or I think almost for any sector of the business in the city of Sacramento is getting space, right, that has proper zoning. And so one of the things that we'd like ask you to consider is allowing multiple companies within one space. And I don't know if that's something that's already being considered, but I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I don't think we have a prohibition of that. So if you have a conditional use permit for a building, let's hypothetically say it's for delivery only dispensary, and you wanted to kind of break that up. There's nothing in our current regulations that would. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So. Currently, our dispensary ordinance requires 1,000-foot in between dispensaries. I don't think that distance requirement, because council's already had some discussions around distance requirements, and co-location, I think, was already kind of mentioned. It hasn't yet been decided, but that's certainly a good suggestion for us to consider.
I have a general question about testing, and unless I was mistaken, there's been 0 permits or requests for labs or testing facilities. It seems like this is probably one of the bigger issues that'll come up, and from everything that I'm learning about, including people in the business, this is like one of the biggest federal issues right now, especially, is pesticides and things left in the cannabis and how it is testing and how accurate that testing is. I know that almost every testing facility, you can take something to 3 different facilities and get a myriad of different test results. And I wonder is more of a question of just how is this going to be tackled, and is this something that's being looked at? It just seems strange that we have all these people that want to grow, but nobody really wants to put out a product that's safe and accessible for people, and that should be part of our goal moving forward, would be safe access of proper medicine that's not cluttered with pesticides and molds and all kinds of other stuff.
So, yeah, you have identified the bottleneck on the industry. And right now, I don't think that no one's doing it because there isn't sufficient money in it. Probably that's really probably a market force. But it is a bottleneck. I think the state is not going to need some gigantic number of testing facilities, but we certainly need way more than we have right now. yeah, I'm I hope that they apply to come to Sacramento because we could use them. I think the real solution is once it becomes a bottleneck for an industry this size, someone's going to figure it out, right? The industry is going to get together and form its own independent cooperative thing that they go out and fund and start it and kick it free and go start some testing facilities. Yep. Anyone from just the neighborhood here? All industry folks. Okay. Yes. Well, that's all for these folks. I've only been on the job for an hour, so this is all their hard work.
Like, do you communicate with the other counties, and are they looking at the city of Sacramento for guidance, or are the other local jurisdictions independent and just kind of closed-minded, and they want to do their own thing, or is there collaboration between the localities?
So we look at what plenty of other people are doing when we're trying to formulate an ordinance. Again, it's not necessarily to rip something off wholesale, because just to be honest, not that stuff much really works. I'll use Denver as an example. There's, I think, a lot of lessons to be learned in Denver. We have to take those lessons and interpret them ourselves. We've been contacted by a number of cities. I've been contacted by a number of sheriffs and chiefs of police. There aren't very many cities that are as far along as we are, and I think that they're going to be playing catch up for a long time. But my goal is to have everything that we do here be the model for the state. And so when fill in the blank city or county says, hey, you know what, cannabis isn't the end of the world, where can I go? They can just come to Sacramento, download our ordinance, swap out Sacramento for fill in the blank, and adopt it. Yeah.
So you say you were looking at Denver, and you were talking about the 0 applications for testing. And so Denver, obviously, they probably have, Colorado have a lot of testing facilities. What's being done to actively, not only them, but other states that have testing facilities, to ask them to duplicate their services here, or at least apply? Is that something that is considered?
So I would put that along the lines of kind of economic development. We haven't gotten far enough in our own process to really put together an economic development strategy. I think we're trying to really just kind of get our hands around what we have here. It is a requirement. So there is one lab in the city of Sacramento, and I would anticipate that they are going to be applying shortly for a permit. And my hope would be that there are is a market for others to move into the space as well. But in terms of going out and recruiting businesses, we haven't been able to get that far in our own internal development yet.
Do you think that the application fees could possibly be one of the reasons why people aren't applying to be in the regulated industry? The fact that there haven't been any testing labs, or there haven't been any testing labs that have applied for regulation, and that there's only 3 manufacturers. Do you find that worrisome, or did you guys foresee it being kind of a slower process? I know the testing labs their strict regulations and there not being enough of them. I know it basically shut down the Oregon industry, so I'm just wondering how you guys foresee things going forward here.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to, the permit fee for a testing lab, for example, I don't think, I certainly haven't received a phone call yet that says, hey, I'd love to come to Sacramento, but that $20,000 permit or permit fee is for testing is my barrier to entry. So I've yet to have that conversation yet, so I don't know. It will require a conditional use permit, and that is the lengthier part of the process because there's a public hearing involved. Our hope is to move these along as quickly as possible, including the testing facilities. All right. I've worn you down. I'll be back in 15 minutes to do it all over again. Or at 6 o'clock tonight. Okay, well, if you want to come and join this and have this discussion again, we will be back at 6 o'clock tonight. Otherwise, we will be doing this again June 12th.